Plane crash as the captain. My fiancé gave the only life-saving equipment to his first love. I didn't argue or protest. Instead, I gladly agreed because in my previous life, when he had to choose between two people, my fiancé, who was also the captain, chose to give the life-saving equipment to me, who was pregnant at the time. The plane made an emergency landing. His first love, who had no life-saving equipment, died tragically due to the impact force of the crash. Later, I, the pregnant survivor, naturally married my fiancé. But on the night of our wedding, he locked me in the basement and brutally beat me with a baseball bat until I miscarried. If you hadn't used your pregnancy to force me to give you the life-saving equipment, Victoria wouldn't have died so horribly. He forced me to kneel in front of his first love's grave and knock my forehead against the ground 999 times. He then made me get pregnant and miscarry over and over again. As punishment for my so-called crime, I was tortured until I completely broke and ended my own life. When I opened my eyes again, all the memories from my previous life returned. This time, I fulfilled his wish. Chapter 1. The entire cabin was in utter chaos, jolting violently as the plane plummeted. Less than 10 minutes remained before the crash. I cradled my swollen belly, pressing tightly against the seat, my face pale as a sheet. The co-pilot, who was distributing the remaining life-saving equipment, looked just as grim as I did, because there was only one survival device left. In the last row, both Victoria and I were without one. Victoria, the first love of my fiancé, Julian. The cockpit door swung open and Julian strode out. The moment she saw him, Victoria's eyes brimmed with tears. "Julian, I'm so scared," she said. She was breathtakingly beautiful, her soft, doe-like eyes shimmering with misty tears. Julian didn't even spare me a glance before pulling Victoria into his arms. His voice was soothing and tender. "Shoo, don't be afraid. I'll protect you." He whispered sweet reassurances to the woman he cherished above all else, completely forgetting about his 7-month pregnant fiancée sitting just a step away. It wasn't until the co-pilot spoke up that Julian finally acknowledged my presence. The moment our eyes met, his expression darkened with irritation. His voice was filled with cold disdain. "I told you before, pregnant women on flights bring nothing but bad luck. You just had to get jealous and insist on coming along. Now you've doomed the entire plane. Are you happy now?" Julian was known as the most handsome and charismatic captain on the airline. Most passengers trusted him blindly. Hearing him say this, the already terrified passengers exploded in rage, hurling insults and curses at me, and even at the innocent child in my womb. A 5-year-old boy even picked up a metal plane model and hurled it at me. The sharp wings slashed across my forehead, and warm blood immediately gushed down my face. As the plane plunged lower, the passengers vented their anger on me. Out of the corner of my eye, Victoria's gaze gleamed with triumph and mockery. She choked back a sob and clutched Julian's sleeve. "Julian, but there's only one life-saving device left. What should we do?" She spoke while letting big, glistening tears spill from her eyes. Maybe you should give it to Clara instead. She's carrying your baby after all. As for me, as long as I can spend my last moments by your side, I'll have no regrets." Julian's eyes turned bloodshot in an instant. He clutched Victoria tightly, kissing the top of her head again and again, his voice filled with determination. "No, Victoria. Meeting you is the greatest blessing of my life. I won't let anything happen to you." Without hesitation, he grabbed the only survival device from the co-pilot's hands and strapped it onto Victoria. As he secured it around her, applause erupted from the crowd. Everyone was moved by their so-called love story. No one, not a single soul, spoke up for me, except the co-pilot who shouted desperately, "Captain, what about your fiancée? There's barely 2 minutes left before impact. She's pregnant. She won't survive this." But Julian only stared at me coldly, his eyes filled with twisted certainty. "You planned this, didn't you?" His voice dripped with venom. "You used my child as leverage to force me into giving you the last survival device so you could kill Victoria. Do you have any idea who she is? She's the most gifted ballet prodigy in the world. Her future is limitless. Just because you failed to achieve your own pathetic dance dreams, you want to ruin her life. You disgusting woman. I won't let you succeed." His hysterical accusations rang through the cabin, cutting through the growing, ear-piercing roar of the plane's descent. But I remained eerily calm. No screaming, no crying, because I had already lived through this once before. I had seen the true face of the man I had loved for over a decade. He never loved me, and since that was the case, I would no longer hold on to any expectations. This time, I would fulfill his wish. I would disappear from his life forever. Chapter 2. At the final critical moment, the co-pilot tried to remove his own life-saving equipment to give it to me, but I stopped him. I lifted my gaze, looking calmly at Julian's stunned expression. In the final seconds before the plane exploded, I silently mouthed to him, "I don't want you anymore, and I don't want your child either." Then I let go of my swollen belly. As gravity pulled me into free fall, my consciousness faded until my entire body plunged into the icy, bone-chilling sea. The explosion's final shockwave shattered my bones. My once-round belly caved in unnaturally. My ears went deaf. The world turned silent. Warm blood gushed from my scalp, scalding my freezing skin with an eerie heat. The deep blue sea had already been dyed red with blood. I floated alone, dazed and adrift as my vision blurred with glowing halos. Through the haze, I saw a wreckage of airplane debris above the wreckage. Rescue helicopters. A soft rope ladder dropped down, and Julian, holding Victoria tightly, climbed up. She was completely unharmed, but before he could climb further, he was blocked by the bloodied and furious co-pilot. I squinted, reading their lips through my hazy vision. The co-pilot shouted, "You heartless bastard! Your wife and child are still drowning in the sea, and you're only worried about saving your old flame." He was truly outraged on my behalf, even though we were never particularly close. But at least this time he survived. Not far away, Julian's rage burned even hotter than the co-pilot's. Victoria sprained her ankle. Julian snapped, "Do you know how serious that is for a ballet prodigy like her? As for why I didn't save my wife and child, that's none of your business." Then Julian suddenly sneered, his gaze dripping with contempt. "Or are you sleeping with my wife? Is that why you care so much about her?" Even after witnessing Julian's cruelty firsthand, his callous words still cut me like a knife. The co-pilot went pale with fury, but he stood his ground. He insisted on getting me medical attention first, but Julian warned him coldly, "Simon, you're just a junior co-pilot. I'm one of your certification examiners. If you keep interfering, I can make sure you never fly a plane again." Simon clenched his jaw, but he didn't back down. And Julian's voice turned deadly serious. "You might not care, but does your girlfriend in the control tower feel the same?" Simon's face instantly went pale. He hesitated. Julian smirked, satisfied that he had successfully intimidated his subordinate. As if acting out of pity, he gave Simon a mocking glance, then cast a contemptuous look at me, lips curling into a cold sneer. "Don't be fooled by that pitiful act of hers. She's an expert at twisting the truth, playing the victim, and lying. Back then, she falsely accused Victoria of hiring thugs to attack her. I rushed to save her and ended up missing the most important competition of Victoria's life. Later, I found out it was all a scheme she orchestrated, the entire thing just to sabotage Victoria's chances of advancing her career. She's a vicious woman. She tricked me into getting her pregnant, then used the baby to force me into an engagement, and now she's using the same dirty tactics to kill Victoria. I've seen through her manipulations long ago. If she wants to act pitiful and freeze in the ocean, then let her freeze." Without a second glance, he turned away. Julian tightened his hold on Victoria, who had fainted in his arms but still had a healthy flush on her cheeks and a peaceful expression. And then he carried her onto the rescue helicopter. The helicopter blades whipped up massive waves across the ocean surface. I was completely exhausted, unable to hold on any longer. As the final wave crashed over me, darkness swallowed my consciousness entirely. Chapter 3. Julian and I weren't always like this. Before senior year of high school, I was his everything. The passwords on his phone and laptop lock screens were all set to my birthday. But our relationship started to crumble when Victoria, the daughter of my family's housekeeper, transferred into our class. 2 weeks after she arrived, one morning as I was coming downstairs, I slipped and broke my leg. At that time, I had been preparing for a major ballet competition. Victoria took my place. That was when I realized she had also been learning ballet, and she was good. And Julian thought the same. During the 2 weeks I spent at home recovering, Victoria became Julian's new deskmate. He was the one who suggested it because Victoria had been bullied by my close friends in the bathroom and Julian just happened to walk by and save her. Chapter 4. From that day on, Julian became Victoria's knight, and I became the hated, irrelevant villainess in their entangled romance. In my previous life, I refused to accept that Julian was being taken from me, acting out in jealous and immature ways. Even when Victoria framed me, I failed to find evidence in time, leading Julian to hate me more and more. In the end, he even blocked me and told both our families he would never marry me. Victoria was the only love of his life. I was heartbroken, falling into severe depression and left the country to study abroad for 4 years. But when I returned, I found out that Victoria had left the country too. Julian, devastated, was drowning in misery and loneliness, and so I found myself back by his side, supporting him. I encouraged him to chase his dreams. He chose to become a pilot so that he could personally fly Victoria to her competitions. I had originally planned to let him go, but on the night Victoria and Julian had a fight and broke up, Julian got drunk and forced himself on me. Afterward, he held up a drug test report from his drink and accused me of being a scheming, shameless woman. But in truth, I had no idea who drugged him either. And yet that night left me pregnant. Under pressure from his parents, Julian was forced to get engaged to me. During that time, Victoria returned to the country and Julian stopped coming home, spending his nights at her place instead. This drove the past me insane with jealousy. Desperate to catch him cheating, I booked the same flight as Victoria. At the critical moment, I pulled out the contract his father had signed with me, stating that if I died, Julian wouldn't get a single cent. Only then did Julian agree to give me the survival gear. But what I never expected was that Julian never loved me, not me and not the child in my womb. Now that I have a second chance at life, it's time to cut my losses. Chapter 5. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I saw was a cold white ceiling. I was lying in the intensive care unit, breathing weakly through a ventilator. Seeing me wake up, the nurse was overjoyed. 10 of your ribs were fractured, both eardrums suffered severe damage, your skull was broken, and your lungs were punctured. It's a miracle you're still alive, she spoke quickly, but my mind was still trapped in the memories of my past life. Even my soul trembled in pain. Half a month later, I was discharged from the hospital. Julian never once showed up during that time. His father called him countless times, but Julian dismissed them all, convinced that I had deceived his parents into weaving a fabricated story. Clara, it's bad enough that you're always scheming against me, but now you're dragging my parents into your act. I'm truly ashamed of you, he said. He had more important things to do, accompanying his first love as she made public appearances as the heir to the group, promoting Victoria's upcoming debut in the entertainment industry. On the day of my discharge, I sat in a wheelchair. The doctor told me my leg bones had suffered a severe, irreparable fracture. I would never be able to dance again. Even walking would be a struggle for the rest of my life. Julian's mother collapsed in tears, fainting in his father's arms. But I remained calm. Instead, I comforted the two devastated parents. It's okay. I'm still alive, aren't I? I didn't die miserably at Julian's hands like in my past life. I was still alive. Chapter 6. To honor my baby, I decided to hold a funeral. That day, I sent Julian a message. Today is our baby's funeral. Come and see her one last time. The doctor said she was a fully formed little girl. Also, come back to sign the divorce papers. Even though Julian and I never had a wedding, when he found out I was pregnant, his parents forced him to register our marriage. Many of my high school classmates attended the funeral. Their expressions were heavy with grief, and they all tried to comfort me. That was when Julian arrived. When he appeared again, he looked radiant. There were faint red marks on his neck, and even the buttons of his white shirt were done up incorrectly. Clearly, whatever he had just been doing was intense. The adults present all turned to Julian with disgusted expressions. No responsible man would spend the day of his child's funeral entangled with another woman. Julian, however, ignored their gazes. His eyes flicked down to my loose-fitting coat, scanning my abdomen before throwing a stack of medical records onto the table. Victoria has a friend who works as a nurse. Before you even called me, she already looked into your medical records. There is no miscarriage record at all. Even your injuries were nothing serious, just a few minor bruises, not even a single fracture. He shook his head as he spoke, his hatred so strong it was almost tangible. How shameless can you be? Just to get attention, you actually staged a funeral to curse your own child? As he spoke, he turned to address the others present. Don't be fooled by her. She's just a despicable woman, a lunatic obsessed with competing with other women. She has no life purpose of her own, only knows how to cling to men. You all should leave now, before she scams you out of your funeral donations. He spoke passionately, as if he had exposed some grand scheme of mine. If not for the fact that everyone here had already seen my baby's ashes and the scars on my abdomen, they might have actually believed him. Julian's parents, their faces darkened with shame, tried to pull him away, not wanting him to embarrass himself further. But Julian shoved them aside. Dad, Mom, I told you from the start that I didn't want to marry this woman, but you forced me. Look at what she's done to our family now. Our family's reputation has been ruined by this lying, disgusting woman. Julian, that's enough. I rolled my wheelchair forward, cutting him off calmly. Julian looked down at me, his gaze filled with contempt. What? You can lie, but you can't handle being exposed. I shook my head, took out the hospital records and divorce papers from my bag, and handed them to him, my expression calm. I don't want Uncle and Auntie to be embarrassed because of you. Julian froze when he saw the documents in my hand, but he still sneered. Do you really think that forging a medical report identical to Victoria's will make me believe you? The next second, I lifted my shirt, revealing my abdomen covered in deep, jagged scars. I didn't have a life vest when the plane exploded. My stomach was torn open. I sighed softly, my voice filled with helplessness. I didn't lie to you, Julian. The baby is really gone. With just one look, Julian's face turned deathly pale. How could this be? He stumbled back slightly, his eyes fixed on the scars. His hands trembled, wanting to touch them but not daring to. But then, as if suddenly remembering something, his demeanor snapped back to arrogance. His cold, hard voice cut through the air. Even if you want a divorce, this is just karma for you. I've already found proof that you hired those thugs to set Victoria up all those years ago. If you try to scheme against her again, the next thing you lose won't just be your child. His words made everyone gasp. Chapter 7. Julian's parents were so furious at their son's cruel accusations that they were at a loss for words. At that moment, my former class president stepped out from the crowd. His tone was puzzled as he asked, "Are you talking about the national ballet competition that summer in our senior year? Because I remember Clara never made it to that event. She was attacked and tortured by a gang of thugs that day." Julian scoffed and interrupted. Huh, so that's what she told you? Those thugs were obviously hired by her to ambush Victoria on her way to the competition. That's not true. The class vice president cut in, exchanging a look with the sports committee leader before speaking up. Those thugs were targeting Clara. If the class president, the sports leader, and I hadn't been passing by and called the police, she would have been in serious trouble. The moment he spoke, other classmates joined in to confirm. Clara returned to school that day accompanied by the police. If she had really staged everything, the police would have exposed her long ago. Julian hadn't expected the conversation to take this turn. His expression grew darker and darker, yet he still refused to believe it. His lips parted as if to argue, but no words came out. That was when his assistant suddenly burst through the door, his face filled with urgency. "Boss, we found the evidence." The police did arrest suspects for an armed assault case back then. The main perpetrator was just released from prison 4 years ago. Julian immediately asked, "Did the main suspect say Clara was behind it?" The assistant stammered, and no, the main suspect didn't speak, but the accomplices handed over their chat records. They confessed that the person who paid them to commit the attack was Victoria. Julian looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His body froze in place. Meanwhile, I remained calm from beginning to end. I had already argued with all my strength to tell him the truth countless times, but he never believed me. Holding the divorce papers, I willed myself closer to him and spoke calmly. "None of this matters anymore. Just sign the papers." At the sound of my voice, Julian turned to look at me, yet the moment our eyes met, he flinched violently as if he had been scalded with boiling oil. He did not want to accept that I was innocent, so he immediately latched onto another accusation. "Even if you didn't frame Victoria, then what about drugging me? That was you, wasn't it?" I listened in silence, without responding. But then an elderly and exhausted voice suddenly broke through the room. I was the one who drugged you. It was his mother who spoke. Chapter 8. Clara is a child your father and I watched grow up. We know her character better than anyone. Julian's mother spoke with a hoarse voice, her eyes filled with exhaustion. When Victoria dumped you, when you were on the brink of falling apart, it was Clara who stayed by your side. She felt sorry for you, so she wanted to take care of you for us, two aging parents. Do you still remember the vow you made at Clara's parents' deathbed? She pointed a trembling finger at Julian, her teeth clenched in rage. You told them not to worry, that you would take care of her for the rest of your life. And this is what you meant by taking care of her? You tortured her like this, even let her lose the child? Do you even know that while you were out messing around, she was diagnosed? She will never dance again in this lifetime. Is this what you meant when you said you would take care of her, you bastard? Julian's mother suddenly looked as if she had aged 10 years. She collapsed into Julian's father's arms as if she had no more tears left to shed. Julian stood frozen in the middle of the crowd like a lonely island, finally waking up to reality, a pathetic joke. His eyes darted around, and for the first time in his life, the man who had always been so overbearing looked lost and helpless. How could it be you? His mother let out a bitter laugh. Why? Because back then you were drowning in alcohol every single day, and when you were drunk, the name you kept calling out wasn't Victoria's. It was Clara's. I thought that deep down you still loved Clara. That's why I went to the doctor and got the medicine. Her voice was tired, devoid of emotion. It was all my doing. If you want to hate someone, hate me. Julian stood there speechless, as if his entire world had collapsed. Then suddenly, as if grasping at straws, he turned to me, his eyes alight with a desperate hope. Then what about in high school, when your friends bullied Victoria in the bathroom? That wasn't a lie, was it? His accusation rang through the room, but this time, only sneers and scoffs filled the silence. Chapter 9. Everyone looked at Julian as if he were an idiot. Our school is an international school. There are security cameras even at the sink entrance of the restroom. If you had even half a brain, you'd know that checking the surveillance footage would clear up any doubts. What's the matter? Don't tell me you believed Victoria's words without even watching the footage, my closest high school friend sneered. Julian froze, visibly uncomfortable. He had always believed that Victoria was a weak, helpless, and pitiful poor girl. That's why he felt the need to protect her. In his eyes, people like us, those who came from good families, were always the villains, privileged, arrogant, and unreasonable. But we never changed. The only one who changed was him. Enough of this. Even if you're convinced I was the villain, I've already atoned for it. I spoke calmly, forcefully shoving the divorce papers into his hands, my patience completely worn out. Sign the damn papers and leave. Julian hadn't expected my reaction. He stood there bewildered, as if he didn't know what to do, as if he had just now realized I was serious. His voice trembled slightly with disbelief. You really want a divorce? I lifted my gaze, wondering if the truth had finally shocked him. Stupid. Just then, his phone rang. Victoria was calling. Julian instinctively softened his tone. Victoria, what's wrong? On the other end, Victoria's panic screams pierced through the phone. Julian, help me. I've been kidnapped. They said they're going to cripple my legs, so I can never dance again. Julian, my stomach hurts so much. The baby isn't going to make it. Please hurry. Before Julian could say a word, the call abruptly ended. For a long moment, Julian stood there in stunned silence before he finally found his voice. I never told Victoria I was coming to see you. I gazed at the clear blue sky in the distance, my tone light and playful. Congratulations, you're going to be a father again. But I'd suggest recalling the things I had discovered in my past life. I couldn't help but mockingly add, you might want to get a paternity test first, otherwise your hair might start turning green. Julian stood there completely lost, his eyes filled with confusion and conflict as he looked at me. I turned my wheelchair and began to leave, but suddenly he called out to me. Clara, how did we end up like this? I paused for a moment, but did not answer him. Chapter 10. After that day, Julian never came to bother me again. According to Simon, Julian had been dismissed. The reason? The black box from the crashed plane revealed that the aircraft had no mechanical issues before takeoff. The crash was caused by the prolonged locking of the control panel, and the person who locked it was Julian. During that time, he left the cockpit and did not allow the co-pilot to take over. And where was Julian during that critical period? Inside the restroom with Victoria, Julian had not only neglected his duties and jeopardized the lives of all the passengers, but he also mishandled the life-saving equipment check, resulting in one missing survival kit. This nearly cost another passenger their life. Simon had personally submitted this specific report. He told me that he and his girlfriend had grown up in poverty, and if it weren't for my family's financial support over the years, they would never have made it out of the mountains. So they couldn't ignore their conscience. The airline acted swiftly in handling Julian's case. On the day the official announcement was made, the entire internet erupted in fury, especially the passengers who had been on that flight. One of them even uploaded a video of Julian grabbing the last survival kit and giving it to his first love. They captioned it, "If he could abandon his own wife and unborn child, there's no way I'd ever fly on a plane piloted by him." Chapter 11. This video went viral once again, and along with it, Victoria's public persona as the cool and untouchable ballet prodigy was completely destroyed. All her scheduled variety shows, commercials, and even film and TV projects were immediately canceled. Even brands that had already filmed commercials with her demanded compensation for the damage to their reputation. In an instant, Victoria became the most hated home wrecker on the internet, a woman who knowingly involved herself with someone else's fiancé. But what truly pushed Victoria to the edge was something else. She couldn't reach Julian because Julian was spending every single day waiting outside my house. After the baby's funeral, I boarded a flight overseas. I also changed my phone number, determined to erase the painful memories of the past and start over. Yet somehow, it was as if Julian had suddenly regained all his memories from before he was 18. Desperate to find out where I was, he knelt for 3 days and 3 nights in the ancestral hall of his family's old mansion after getting a beating from his father. A soft-hearted housekeeper finally caved in and gave him a vague address. Overjoyed, Julian clung to that tiny clue and began searching, knocking on doors one by one. During his search, he was almost arrested for acting suspiciously, and local police started patrolling around him daily. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of searching and being on the verge of deportation, he knocked on my door. At that time, I was sitting in the living room reading a book when the housekeeper opened the door. "Hello. I'm looking for Clara." His voice was hoarse and broken, filled with sorrow and endless regret. I lifted my gaze and looked at him, my expression calm and indifferent. "I already submitted the divorce application. All that's left is for you to sign it." As if my indifferent tone had deeply wounded him, Julian's exhausted face twisted into a bitter smile. "Clara, can we not get divorced?" I've finally woken up. I realize now just how terribly wrong I was. "Please, can you give me one more chance to atone for my mistakes? Let's live a good life together. Let me be your knight again." I lowered my gaze and coldly refused. "No, Julian." His entire body trembled. His eyes, "I understand. I will continue to replace the protagonist's name with Clara and the fiancé's name with Julian for the rest of the provided text, ensuring consistency and a smooth reading flow." Reddened, and even his dry, cracked lips quivered. He staggered toward me and slowly knelt down, his voice filled with remorse. I had someone investigate, and I finally found out that Victoria transferred schools just to get close to me. Everything she said about being bullied was a complete lie. She orchestrated it all herself. His gaze slowly traveled over my blanket-covered legs, his pale and gaunt face twitching with grief. I'm sorry, Clara. I shouldn't have doubted you. I was wrong, so wrong. Victoria, she's even more disgusting than I ever imagined. The child in her womb isn't mine. It belongs to her first love from back home. And our so-called first time together? She had surgically restored her virginity beforehand. Enough. I coldly cut him off, not wanting to hear any more of his filthy revelations. I set down my book, then laughed mockingly as I turned to face him. "So what you're saying is, now that you've realized Victoria is disgusting, you've decided to crawl back to me for forgiveness? That because Victoria turned out to be a horrible person, you finally see my worth? That because she betrayed you, you now feel obligated to clear my name?" I let out a sharp laugh as if I had just heard the most ridiculous excuse ever made by a trashy man. "But tell me, Julian, what if Victoria had actually been a good girl? What if everything was just in your head? Would that mean I deserved all the pain you put me through? What did I ever do wrong?" Julian froze, his lips trembling, unable to respond. His eyes were filled with regret and agony, as if he were about to be swallowed whole by his own guilt. I'm sorry. Chapter 12. He finally realized that the pain he had caused me was something he could never atone for in this lifetime. His entire body curled up in agony, hunched over, letting out a wretched cry like an animal moments before its death. But my heart remained unmoved. I gestured to the housekeeper to open the door. Sir, for the sake of your first love, you killed my child and ruined my life. I will never be able to dance again. Your sins are beyond redemption, because I will never, ever forgive you. The moment you stole the last survival gear, whatever fate still tied us together was severed completely. Crack. It was the sound of something shattering. Julian lifted his trembling hand, revealing his open palm as if offering a peace token. Inside was the birthday gift I had given him when I was 16, a small crystal button engraved with the words, Julian Big Brother's Forgiveness Token. At 16, I had smiled mischievously as I handed it to him. If you ever make me mad, this button will save your life. But remember, you only get one chance. 17-year-old Julian had laughed and teased me. What if you get really, really mad? So mad that nothing I do can fix it. At 16, I had puffed up my cheeks, my almond-shaped eyes widening in disbelief. What if I'm that mad? That means you must have done something really, really awful. In that case, I'd never forgive you. Time had quietly slipped away. That casual joke 17-year-old Julian had once made had now become the final nail in 25-year-old Julian's coffin. Chapter 13. After that day, Julian returned to his home country. Meanwhile, under the rehabilitation treatment of my family doctor abroad, I gradually regained the ability to walk and even dance. During this time, I had completely shut myself off from outside news. It wasn't until Julian's father's birthday that I finally boarded a flight home. When Julian's parents picked me up at the airport, their hair had turned completely white. I was shocked. They hesitated for a long time. It wasn't until after I finished paying my respects to my parents and my baby that they finally spoke. Julian, he has been sentenced to death. The execution is next week. I was stunned. A chilly autumn breeze swept past, sending goosebumps across my skin. Why? I asked. Julian's father spoke in a deep, solemn voice. When he came back from abroad, it was as if he had lost his soul. He locked himself in his room and refused to get up. His fever soared to 40 degrees Celsius, and for 2 whole days he was completely delirious. When he finally woke up, the first thing he said was, Mom, Dad, I think I killed Clara. Your aunt and I were scared out of our minds. We couldn't reach you at the time, and it was only after an old friend of ours went to check on you and confirmed you were safe that we could finally breathe again. A chill ran through me. A crazy thought suddenly surfaced in my mind. Could it be that Julian was reborn too? Julian's father didn't notice my reaction and continued speaking. But from that day on, Julian became more and more unhinged. He dug out everything in the house related to you and spent days and nights reading through it all, crying and laughing at the same time. He kept muttering things like, why was I so stupid? Why did I hurt Clara? It wasn't Clara's fault. Why did I reincarnate so late? At this point, Julian's father's voice faltered. His deeply wrinkled face was already streaked with tears. Julian's mother picked up where he left off. Your uncle and I tried to take him to see a psychologist, but on the way there, he jumped out of the car and ran away. After that, we never saw him again. The next time we heard about him was from the police. They found him in an underground basement along with 2 corpses that had been tortured to the point of becoming mere skeletons. The bodies had decomposed beyond recognition. It took me a long time to find my voice. Who were the victims? She let out a heavy sigh. One was Victoria and the other was her first love from her hometown. The same man who once helped her hire those thugs to hurt you. Chapter 14. After that day, I went to inquire about the case with a friend who was handling it. It was through him that I finally learned the full story. After the funeral, Victoria's nightmare began. Not only was her career completely destroyed, but every dirty detail of her past was dug up and exposed. Julian finally saw her true colors and deleted every trace of her from his life. At first, Victoria thought she could use her pregnancy to force him to stay, but once Julian calmed down, he was colder than ever. He threw down 2 DNA test reports, one confirming that he was not the father, and the other proving that Victoria's child actually belonged to her first love. Julian had been played for a fool all along. Victoria had always been a parasitic vine, surviving by clinging to Julian, never having any real power or resources of her own. After losing her dream of becoming a rich wife, she had no choice but to return to her first love. But that man was nothing but a gambling, drinking, cheating lowlife. Before long, he had burned through all of Victoria's savings. Falling from luxury back into poverty was a nightmare for him, one he couldn't accept. And so he turned all his rage on Victoria, using her as his punching bag. When Victoria couldn't take the abuse anymore, her hatred for me reached its peak. That's when she came up with an idea to kidnap me and demand a ransom. But Julian had been watching them closely all along. Before they could board a flight to find me, Julian ambushed them on the highway, ramming their car at full speed and flipping it over. Later, in the police investigation report, it was revealed that the reborn Julian had suffered severe mental instability due to the trauma of his past mistakes. He had developed schizophrenia and violent manic disorder. Because of this, he was declared unfit for execution. Instead, he would spend the rest of his life locked away in a psychiatric hospital. Chapter 15. Before visiting Julian in the psychiatric hospital, I put on a white dress, the one I had loved most in my past life. The moment he saw me, Julian cried tears of blood. He knelt on the padded floor, his hospital gown hanging off his frail, bony frame. I asked him one question: "How did you die?" In just 1 second, his face turned deathly pale. He realized that I, too, had been reborn. No wonder. No matter how hard I tried, I could never win you back. Julian let out a bitter laugh. He raised his stiff, trembling fingers and pointed at his heart, his voice hoarse. I was stabbed right in the heart, by my own hand. Then he grinned, his expression tinged with madness. I was too stupid. 3 days after your death, my co-pilot uncovered the truth, just like in this life. He never believed you were the villain. I let out a soft sigh and turned away. I didn't want to hear any more. Everything he said only made this all the more ironic. Just as I reached the door, Julian asked me one last thing. If you could go back to that night when you were 17, would you still make the same wish? I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I simply walked away. Half a month later, on a cold, dark night, I heard the news. Julian had used a hidden plastic bag and ended his life. When I received the news, I was boarding a flight to Northern Europe. The pilot was Simon. He stood at the boarding gate greeting passengers. When he saw me, he smiled slightly. As I walked past him, I murmured a quiet blessing. "Congratulations on your wedding." The plane took off smoothly, soaring into the sky. I looked out at the vast blue horizon. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the storm had finally passed.